Today we are going to discuss Kevin Love. We're going to discuss whether it was a good move to start him in Game 2, whether that paid off, what the risks and the rewards are, and why I actually changed my mind when creating this video on what my original thoughts were. The first thing I want to do in discussing this conversation is hear from two outside perspectives. So
the big one I thought was, you mentioned them starting Love. That allowed Jimmy Butler to guard Murray.
In Game 1, we talked about cross matches, creating a problem for the small ball Miami lineup. So to give them more size, Spoelstra dusted off Kevin Love after benching him for the last 3 games.
So I love thinking basketball. I love Draymond. I love Steve Kerr. Those are all brilliant minds, but I'm going to slightly disagree with them. And I'm going to say that the reason for Kevin Love starting, instead of him being a force on defense and his impact on defense, allowing Butler to guard Murray, allowing bigger matches, whatever, I'm going to say his impact is more seen on offense. Okay, so first, while we watch some clips on defense, I think a more important barometer here is that we see that Kevin Love is a net neutral on defense. The reason I believe he's a net neutral is because of the style of offense Denver plays relative to the style of offense Boston plays. So if you think back to that Boston video where I was talking about them playing especially 5-out style offense, the 5-out targets the slower defenders, as opposed to Denver does not play that same 5-out. Instead, they play an offense that is very much focused on Jokic and then Murray, and essentially playing off of what Jokic is able to create. So because of that, there's less targeting slower defenders on drives, kickouts, etc., and you're allowed to have Kevin Love essentially use his instincts, use his wit, his defensive knowledge, instead of using just his pure athletic ability on defense. So the reason I argue that Kevin Love is a net neutral instead of a net positive, despite 3 good plays right there we saw, is because Denver still scored the crap out of the ball. Denver scored like 1.23 points per possessions. The difference was Miami scored more. Okay? The big difference between Game 1 and Game 2 is Miami scored at an unbelievably efficient clip. Okay, so Kevin Love played good defense here, played adequate defense here, net neutral, okay? But he provided offensive spark, at least to a certain extent, along with Miami's other changes. And I believe that's what allowed them to win Game 2. So the first assumption I had that I think was flawed was that when Kevin Love came into the starting lineup, he replaced Caleb Martin. He essentially took Caleb Martin's the majority of his minutes because he was starting in his place. That's what I just assumed. Now that was flawed of me. Right? So the first thing I noticed is going back and looking through the minutes, the person whose minutes he really kind of replaced was Highsmith. Okay, so then the question is, what does Highsmith provide on offense versus what does Kevin Love provide on offense? So the first important clarification is I think Highsmith was a crucial impact on the Boston series because he could provide that one-on-one driving and defense. However, because of Denver's defensive system, that is less important, or offensive system that is less important. So what we're looking here is how is Denver playing Highsmith on defense? Okay, when the Heat are on offense, how is Denver reacting? Okay, they have arguably, I wouldn't even say arguably, I'll say their worst defender in Michael Porter Jr. on him. So that's first off a caveat there. You can essentially put your worst defender on him. Because Highsmith isn't a very good 3-point shooter, you also don't have to respect them on the perimeter. Hey, although Miami does end up getting a good look here, you can see right there, Michael Porter Jr. aggressively helps off because they're not worried about this. And so overall, Kevin Love represents a bigger threat on the perimeter and on offense than Highsmith does. So because of the reality that Denver is going to essentially score at a pretty good clip no matter what, Miami realizes they need to match them on offense, surpass them on offense, instead of just merely trying to stop their defense. Okay, so this is the perfect example. Boom, MPJ helps off, leaves a massive opportunity for a 3, and Denver's okay with that because Highsmith doesn't shoot very well from behind the arc. Okay, so then let's look at the 2 clearest examples of what I think Kevin Love provides on offense. Okay, the first is simply he has an intelligence about him. Making those kinds of outlet passes or passes like that in general are extremely difficult, and not a huge amount of players can do that, but that's a tremendous pass by Kevin Love. But then the bigger impact for Love, in my opinion, comes from on the offensive side. Okay? So he is able to space the court. He already occupies a better defender in KCP right away. Okay? But he is able to punish defenders that help aggressively much more effectively than Highsmith is, and allow the Heat to have more offense on the court, more scoring on the court at any time. So in conclusion, I think Kevin Love, upon further consideration, despite my original thoughts, I think Kevin Love's starting was actually a good move by the Heat, or at least getting significant playing time. I don't know if the starting actually matters. But the reason I believe it's good is because Denver doesn't really target specific defenders on defense. They instead just kind of play their system regardless. So Kevin Love's a net neutral on defense, but he provides advanced shooting and decision-making on the offensive end, which I believe contributed to the Heat victory in Game 2. And I look forward to seeing their decisions in Game 3, how much Kevin Love ends up playing.